Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Math with Dr. War. Today we're going to be looking at rate of change, and this is another word for slope. Now this is high emphasis on the TASC test and can be found in the category of functions. So essentially on the TASC test, you have to be able to calculate and interpret the average rate of change of a function, which can be presented to you as 2 points, in an equation, as in a graph, or as a table. Also, they can ask you to find the rate of change over a specified interval, which means that they choose the points. They tell you where to start and where to end. Let's begin. So the first question that we have here, it says, linear function k passes through points -3, 7 and 3, 3. And they're asking for the rate of change of function k. Whenever they give you 2 points, the first thing I want you to do is to line these points up under each other. So I have -3, 7, 3, 3. Now we're going to label these points. Remember, points have an x value and a y value. Your first point always represents x, and your second point represents y. If you forget, think of the alphabet. Who comes first in the alphabet? X, followed by Y. Now, once you have labeled them, your next step is to subtract. And how you're going to remember to subtract is that word change. Change always means subtract. Think about when you go to the store and someone gives you change. In order for you to get change, they have to perform a subtraction. So we need to subtract. So I'm going to put the subtraction sign. A lot of students, they don't like subtracting in this column form. So I'm going to write a number sentence. For the x, it's -3, take away 3. And for the y, it's 7 minus 3. Now for the y portion, this looks familiar. This looks like normal math. We all know 7 minus 3 would give us a value of 4. Now over here, this doesn't look so normal. This looks like integers, and remember your rules of subtracting. Keep the first, change the subtraction sign to an addition, and change the second integer to be to the opposite. Now we're adding, the signs are the same. The rule states when that happens you add, which gives you 6, and keep the sign of the larger number. Well, they're both the same, so you're going to keep negative. We have our value for x and we have our value for y. Now, when they say rate of change, which is another word for slope, and slope is defined as the change in y over the change in x. Or some of you probably remember this as rise over run. And when you rise, it's like an elevator. So you go up and down, and you're going up or down on the y-axis. And when we say the change in x, the x-axis runs horizontal. So it's like you're walking on the street. You're going left or right. Now, who is your y value? 4. Who's your x value? -6. Now, we're still in integer land here. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. So your answer is going to be a negative. So if you go to the 4 choices, you can exclude C and D. Now, slope is always a fraction, and you must remember that fractions, you have to reduce to lowest terms. Both of these numbers are even, and you must remember that even numbers are divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide those by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So your slope is -2/3. Therefore, my answer is B. And that is how you find a slope if you're given 2 points. Let's try another question. It says, linear functions m and p are shown below. Function m is a table. Function p is an equation. In comparing the rates of change, which statement about function m and function p is true? I'm going to start with function p. Now, function p is an equation. And because it's an equation, this is the equation of a line in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Now, whoever is connected to the x is your slope. So m represents your slope. So you always know your slope, which is another word for rate of change, if it's attached to the x value. So let's go back here. So who is your slope? Who is attached to the x? Oh yes, it's the 7. So here, your rate of change is 7. Now, when you look at a table is like if they're giving you points. Now, in the previous question, they give you just 2 points. So here in this table, it looks like you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So because you have 4, you can choose whichever 2 you want. And notice that they're kind of lined up for you. I'm going to choose these 2. Now, a lot of students, they don't like negatives. So if that's you, I want to go up here. So I'm going to choose these 2 rows here. I have 0, 1, 2, 11. So just as the previous example, if you're going to find a rate of change, what do you have to do? You got to subtract. And if we're going to subtract, we can write our number sentence, right? So you have 0 minus 2 and 1 minus 11. And also you need to label. It's already labeled for you. You got your x here and your y. Now that's why you have to be able to add and subtract and multiply and divide your integers fluently. If this was on the calculator, you can put it in the calculator as is, 0 minus 2, and you get negative 2. 1 minus 11, this would give you negative 10. Now remember, when it is 2 points, your rate of change is the change in y over the change of x. Now who's our y? Negative 10 over, who's your x? Negative 2. 2 negatives gives us a positive, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the rate of change for the table is 5. Let's look at our answer choices. So A says their rates of change differ by 2. Now differ means that it's the difference. So 1 is 7 and 1 is 5. If you subtract those numbers, what do you get? You get 2. So A is your answer. Let's look at the other choices. B says their rates of change differ by 4. Now that is completely false because again, 7 minus 5 is 2. C says function M has a greater rate of change than function P. Now function M, its rate of change is 5, function P is 7, and we all know 5 is less than 7. So your answer is not C. And the last one states that function M and function P have the same rate of change. This is false because that's 5 and that is 7. The question says, which proportional relationship has the greatest rate of change? A is an equation. Remember from just now I said if it's an equation, it's going to be in slope-intercept form. So you have y equals mx plus b. Remember, whoever is next to the x is your slope. This is our equation. Who's next to the x? 7. So our rate of change is 7. That was simple. Now B is in words. And it says the value of y increases by 12 for every increase of 4 in the value of x. Now remember, when we were looking at the 2 points, we said that rate of change is slope. We said that slope is rise over run. And another way to define slope is the change in y over the change in x. Well, how is your y changing? It says that the value of y increases by 12. And every increase of 4 in the x value. Now, even though it's a fraction, check to see if you can divide evenly. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So for B, our rate of change is 3. And remember, rate of change is the same thing as slope. I know. Why can't these mathematicians use just one word? C is in the form of a table. If it's in the form of a table, you get to choose the points. So again, you can choose whichever points you want. So I want to choose this one here. And suppose I chose this one here. Again, you can choose whichever one you want. So you have 2, 8, 6, 24. This is X. This is Y. Remember what we're doing. We're going to be subtracting. You could write your number sentence if that's what makes you happy. 2 minus 6 is negative 4. 8 minus 24 is going to be negative, and that would be 16. Remember that that would be the change in Y over the change in X. Y is negative 16. X is negative 4. 2 negatives gives you a positive, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. Again, you can choose any points you want to. Just to prove it to you, I'm going to choose, suppose I chose this and this, just these two. So you have 0, 2, 0, 8. Remember, we got to subtract them, right? That gives you negative 2. That gives you negative 8. So remember, your change will be negative 8 over negative 2. 2 negatives are positive. 8 divided by 2, 4. So again, it doesn't matter where you choose. You're going to get the same number. D. D is a graph. You gotta find a rate of change. So when it's a graph, you have to pick 2 good points. I always say 2 good points. So I want to start here. This is a good point. Now a good point, and you can check out some videos, I'm going to tag them, of how to find rate of change. A good point is when your line is intersecting a corner of your box. So this is a good point. Okay, let's keep going. You've got to find where it intersects. Okay, here is another good point. Okay, you can keep going because we want to find those. Okay, here is another good point that you could use. All right. Okay, let's keep going. And here's another good point. So we got some good points here, but we only need 2 of them. So suppose I chose this one and this one. When you pick your 2 good points, make a triangle. So I have to go up here and then cross here. Now, once you make your triangle, remember slope is the change in Y over the change in X. Now, because this is a graph, you have to look at your intervals and the way that they're being counted. So this is going from 0 to 2, 4, 6. So you're counting in 2s. All right. So here, this value starts at 6. So if you count, you're counting in 2s. So this would be 2, 4, 6. So Y is 6. I went up 6 units. What some students do is they like, oh, I start at 6, right? And I end at 12. So how much did I travel? You actually traveled 6, because if you go from 6 to 12, how do you get there? You had to add 6, correct? All right, let's get our change in our X value. Now again, look to see how the X's are being counted. Now to get to a 1, it's actually 2 boxes, which means that this in the middle is actually 0.5. So if I go from here all the way to here, you start at 1, then you get to 2. So you're like, oh, 2 minus 1 is 1. Or you could just count, that's 1 unit. So 6 divided by 1 is 6. Now remember, we went up, so that's positive. And then we ran to the right, which is also positive. I'm going to pick 2 different points. Suppose you chose this one and this one. when you make your triangle, which is like this, now again, you're counting in 2. So you're going 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So I went up 18 units. Then we have to get here to this point. So remember that's 1, 2, 3. And what's 18 divided by 3? You still get your 6. Now, the question says, which proportional relationship has the greatest rate of change? Now, D was 6, C is 4, B is 3, and A is 7. So I'm hoping you chose A. A, which is the equation, had the greatest rate of change. The rate of change from an equation, from a table, from a graph, and then this one, they tried to be slick and they put it in words, but remember, rate of change is the change of y over the change of x. I hope this lesson has been helpful. Good luck on your TASC examination, and again, if you like the content, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Have a great day.